Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are on to part 3 of Emerson's journals, collection number 24. He is in Italy at this time, and he's age 29, and we are up to April 3rd, which is a Wednesday. And with that said, I will go ahead and start reading it. The famous Miserere was sung this afternoon in the Sistine Chapel. The saying at Rome is that it cannot be imitated, not only by any other choir, but in any other chapel in the world. The Emperor of Austria sent Mozart to Rome on purpose to have it sung at Vienna with like effect, but it failed. Surely it is sweet music, and sounds more like the Aeolian harp than anything else. The pathetic lessons of the day relate to the treachery of Judas and apply select passages from the prophets and psalms to the circumstances of Jesus. Then, whilst the choir chants the words, and then these are in Latin with no translation, all the candles in the chapel are extinguished but one. During the repetition of this verse, the last candle is taken down and hidden under the altar. Then out of the silence and the darkness rises this most plaintive and melodious strain, the whole congregation kneeling, Miserere me Deus, etc. The sight and the sound are very touching. Everything here is in good taste. The choir are concealed by the high fence which rises above their heads. We were in Michelangelo's chapel, which is full of noblest scriptural forms and faces. Thursday. These forms strike me more than I expected, and yet how do they fall short of what they should be? Today I saw the Pope wash the feet of 13 pilgrims, one from each nation of Christendom. One was from Kentucky. After the ceremony he served them at dinner. This I did not see. But Gregory the 16th is a learned and able man. He was a monk and is reputed of pure life. Why should he not leave one moment this formal service of 50 generations and speak out of his own heart, the father of the church to his children, though it were but a single sentence or a single word? One earnest word or act to this sympathetic audience would overcome them. It would take all hearts by storm. Tonight I heard the Miserere sung in St. Peter's, and with less effect than yesterday. But what a temple! When night was settling down upon it, and a long religious procession moved through a part of the church, I got an idea of its immensity, such as I had not before. You walk about on it in its ample marble pavement as you would on a common, so free are you of your neighbors, and throngs of people are lost upon it. And what beautiful lights and shades on its mighty gilded arches and vaults and far windows and brave columns, and its rich clad priests, and look as if they were pictures come down from the walls and walking. Thence we came out. I was walking with two painters, Cranch and Alexander, under the moon, and saw the planet shine upon the finest fountain in the world, and upon all the stone saints on the piazza and the great church itself. This was a spectacle which only Rome can boast. How very beautiful! An Arabian Nights tale. Good Friday. The mystery of the Traor is said and shown in all the churches, and some with scenic representations. I have seen nothing affecting, though it is sometimes, I am told, very much so. Many religious processions in the streets, muffled in black with staves surmounted with death's heads. This night I saw with Cranch the great Colosseum by moonlight. It is full of dread. Saturday. I did not go to the baptism of the Jew today. Usually it is a weary farce. 'Tis said they buy the Jews at 150 scoods the head to be sprinkled. This man was respectable. This p.m. I heard the Greek Mass. The chants are in Armenian. Sunday. This morning the Pope said Mass in St. Peter's. Rich dresses, great throngs, lines of troops, but not much to be said for the service. It is Easter, and the curtains are withdrawn from the pictures and statues to my great joy, and the Pope wears his triple crown instead of a mitre. At 12 o'clock the benediction was given. A canopy was hung over the great window that is above the principal door of St. Peter's, and there sat the Pope. The troops were all under arms and in uniform in the piazza below, and all Rome and much of England and Germany and France and America was gathered there also. The great bell of the church tolled, drums beat, and trumpets sounded over the vast congregation. Presently, at a signal, there was silence, and a book was brought to the Pope, out of which he read a moment, and then he rose and spread out his hands and blessed the people. All knelt as one man. He repeated his actions, for no words could be heard, stretching his arms gracefully to the north and south and east and west, pronouncing a benediction on the whole world. It was a sublime spectacle. Then sounded drums and trumpets, then rose the people, and everyone went his way. This evening I have seen the illumination of the church. When it was dark, I took the well-known way, and on reaching the bridge of St. Angelo, found the church already hung with lights from the turret to foundation. But this was only partial. At the moment when the bell in the tower tolled 8 o'clock, out flashed innumerable torches in the air, and the whole edifice blazed with fires which cast the first lamps into shade, and lit up every face in the multitude of the piazza, as with daylight. But it is very melancholy to see an illumination in this declining church and impoverished country. I love St. Peter's Church. It grieves me to think that after a few days I shall see it no more. It has a peculiar smell from the quantity of incense burned in it. The music that is heard in it is always good, and the eye is always charmed. It is an ornament of the earth. It is not grand, it is so rich and pleasing, it should be rather called the sublime of the beautiful. Tuesday. Today I went with Cranch and Wall to the Palazzo Chigi, a good gallery where there is the Laura of Paul Veronese, to the Farnese, a fine palace where are Annibale Carracci's frescoes, but saw no pictures beside. Then we crossed the Tiber in a boat to the Corsini Palace, whose noble gardens ascend the side of Mons Jaculum. Pleasant walk and far prospect of the Apennines and of Mount Soracte. Then to the Sciarra Palace, whose gallery is one of the best in Rome. Quick eye had Cranch to detect a Titian everywhere. He admires him as an original painter. Here was Guido's Magdalene, Leonardo da Vinci's Modesty and Vanity, Titian's Mistress, Raphael's portrait of himself, and fine pictures by Garofalo. All the Americans are gone, and I who lately knew them not, now feel quite alone. My countrymen and countrywomen have been so civil and social. Miss Bridgen is a most intelligent and excellent lady, and young Grant has made me much a debtor by his courtesy. April 10th. Walked alone in the spacious grounds and fine groves of the Villa Borghese, whilst the birds sang to me. I thought it would be good to spend an hour there by myself every day. And then there's a series of Greek letters, words that are not translated. April 11th. How have all nations and ages contributed to the magnificence of the Vatican? If we could only know the history of each marble there, when and by whom and for whom it was carved, of what luxurious villa it formed an ornament, it would open to us the story of the whole world. Each has figured in splendid scenes and served the pleasure of the lords of mankind. Then again, most gladly would I know the place of all these works in the history of art, how this vase and that statue were designed, what the sculptor and his patron thought of them, and the marks of the eras of progress and decline. But now they amaze me and beget a vague curiosity which they cannot satisfy, nor can any living man. I went up to the top of St. Peter's and climbed into the copper ball. It is necessary to go up into the dome in order to estimate the prodigious dimensions of the edifice. It takes one's breath away to look down into the church from the Giro within the cupola, and at first the temptation is terrible to throw yourself down, though the walk is wide and the railing is high. With some pauses and some conversation I succeeded in getting round the dizzy promenade, but like many things in Rome, it is a quite unimaginable spot. The view from the exterior of the cupola of the Campagna di Roma is delicious, from the Apennines on one side to the sea on the other, and Tiber flowing through his marble wilderness below. April 13th. Rome fashions my dreams. All night I wander amidst statues and fountains, and last night was introduced to Lord Byron. It is a graceful termination to so much glory that Rome, now in her fallen state, should be the metropolis of the arts. Art is here a greater interest than anywhere else. The cafes are filled with English, French, and German artists, both sculptors and painters. The number of mosaicistas and print shops is surprising. Rinaldi has just finished a mosaic picture of Paestum, which is valued at 1,000 louis d'or. I am indebted to my new-found countryman for some most pleasant hours, a grateful relief to sights of ruins. I do not yet fall in with that class of English I had hoped to see, those best educated gentlemen, namely, who are not bred with a view to any profession, nor even to politics, but only to maintain the old honors of their houses. In such a class one would hope to find chivalry and learning and sense. But I am not so fortunate as to meet them, but of dandies in abundance. A gentleman, I suppose, is as rare as a genius. Those who usurp the names are often masses of selfishness and littleness. Sunday, April 14th. Attended divine service at the English chapel. To preach well, you must speak the truth. It is vain to say what has been said every Sunday for 100 years, if it is not true. April 15th. Few pictures please me more than the Vision of St. Romualdo by Andrea Sacchi in the Vatican. What a majestic form is the last Carmelite in the train who ascends the steps. One is greater for knowing that such forms can be. What a cant of the head has this same figure! Look at him. I shall, I think, remember few sculptures better when I get back into my chimney corner, with the beautiful head of the justice who sits with prudence on the monument of Paulus III, on the left with the tribuna in St. Peter's. It was designed by Michelangelo, executed by William della Porta. But where in the universe is the archetype from which the artist drew this sweetness and grace? There is a heaven. I have been to see the library of the Vatican. I think they told me the hall was 1/4 of a mile long. Afterwards, the Elgin marble casts. What heads and forms! In Rome, all is ruinous. In the garden before my window, the flower pots stand upon blocks made of the capitals of old columns, turned upside down. Everywhere you may see in the walls and the foundations of houses fragments of carved and fluted stone, now cemented in with rough stones, but once the ornament of the Luculi or Scaurari, or even of Vesta or Jove. April 17th. I have been to the church of St. Onofrio to see the tomb of Tasso. Then in the convent, the courteous father showed us his bust in wax. He died in the convent, and this head was taken at the time from the corpse. A noble head it is, full of independence and genius. It resembles strongly the prints I have seen of his head, but is better, I should think, than any. I shall always like him the better for having seen this face. I have never yet learned to feel any strong interest in a poet so imitative, but since God marked him, I will attend to him. In the convent was also a beautiful Madonna by Leonardo da Vinci. I neglected on the 15th to record my visit to the church of Aracoli, once the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus, a dim-lighted, spacious, and lofty temple worthy of its name and fame and location. Here, if I rightly remember, Gibbon says he conceived the design of writing his history. Its scala might be called the giant's staircase, and on some of the steps were half-effaced inscriptions. What a memorandum is each step to the historical eye that can see the priest of Job, ages back, climbing the same hill, burning incense on the same spot. What pleasant fountains all over Rome, in every villa garden and piazza. An eye for beauty is nature's gift to this people. They delight in bright colors and in all ornaments. As we sat in the cafe, we agreed that it was decorated and furnished with a beauty and good taste which could not be rivaled in America. No man should travel until he has learned the language of the country he visits. Otherwise, he voluntarily makes himself a great baby, so helpless and so ridiculous. Here is a insertion from the editor. In Italy, the little airs of the street singers took Mr. Emerson's fancy. He used to recall this verse of the inebriate's pathetic explanation and appeal to his wife. And then follows some short Latin poem which is not translated. In Rome, at the best trattoria, you may get a good dinner for 15 bajocchi. Thus, today and yesterday I have dined at the Lepri on this fashion: macaroni alla napoletana, 3; mongana con spinaggio, 5; crema in piatta, 5; and 2 rolls of bread to eat with it, 2, equaling 15 cents for a good dinner in the best house. Add 1 or 2 for waiter. My breakfast at the most expensive cafe in Rome costs 16 cents. Coffee in the evening, 5, and my chamber at the Grand Bretagna, 50 cents. Then there is an Italian sentence here, which is translated below in the footnote, so I will read it. The plant man in Italy springs up stronger than in any other land whatsoever, and the atrocious crimes there done are a proof. Alfieri. Hotel de Gran Bretagna, Piazza di Spagna, Rome, April 20th. Yesterday I went with Cranch and Smith and Wall to Tivoli. I cannot describe the beauty of the cascade, nor the terror of the grotto, nor the charm of the iris that arched the torrent. The temple of Vesta is one of the most beautiful of ruins, and in a chosen place. The whole circuit of about 4 miles, which we made with the Cicerone, showed everywhere a glorious landscape. All was bright with the warm sun. The ground was sprinkled with gay flowers, and among others that pink thing with a spicy smell we used to call rabbit's ears, which is perhaps called cyclamen. Then there was the great aloe with its formidable fleshy spine growing about, and, which is a rare sight, one of these plants was in bloom. We found the remains of the villa of Catullus, then the reputed site of the house of Horace, and hard by the arched ruins of the villa of Quintus Varus. Here, too, they say Maecenas lived, and no wonder that poet and patron should have come to this fair specular mount, escaping from the dust of the capital. The Campagna lies far and wide below, like a sea. Then we went to the Villa d'Este, whose beauty in my eyes outshone the beauty of the cascade. Such trees, such walls, such fountains, such grottos, such adornments, the long, long house, all its empty halls painted with fresco, the piazza with its vast prospect, the silver river, the sun that shone and the air that blew, I would fain keep them in my memory, the fairest image of Italy. The villa belongs to the Duke of Modena, who never saw it, and it is occupied only by a custode. I have paid a last visit to the Capitoline Museum and Gallery. 1 visit is not enough. No, nor 2, to learn the lesson. The Dying Gladiator is a most expressive statue, but it will always be indebted to the muse of Byron for fixing upon it forever his pathetic thought. Indeed, Italy is Byron's debtor, and I think no one knows how fine the poet he is who has not seen the subjects of his verse, and so learned to appreciate the justness of his thought, and at the same time their great superiority to other men's. I know well the great defects of Childe Harold. In the gallery I coveted nothing so much as Michelangelo's portrait by himself. Rome, April 22nd. I went this morn to the church of Trinita de Monte to see some nuns take the veil. Can any ceremony be more pathetic than to see youth, beauty, rank thus self-devoted to mistaken duty? I went this afternoon to see Michelangelo's statue of Moses at the church of San Pietro in Vinculo, and it is grand. It seems he sought to embody the law in a man. Directly under the statue, at the side where the whole face is seen, the expression is terrible. I could wish away those emblematic horns. Alzati parla, said the enthusiastic sculptor. From a letter to Miss Emerson, Rome, April 22nd. Quote, "Here is matter for all feeling," said Byron. And yet how evanescent and superficial is most of that emotion which art and magnificence can awaken. It yields in me to the interest the most ordinary companion inspires. I never get used to men. They always awaken expectations in me which they always disappoint, and I am a poor asteroid in the great system, subject to disturbances in my orbit, not only from the planets but from all their moons. The wise man, the true friend, the finished character we seek everywhere, and only find in fragments. Yet I cannot persuade myself that all the beautiful souls are fled out of the planet, or that always I shall be excluded from good company and yoked with green, dull, pitiful persons. After being cabined up by sea and by land since I left home, with various little people, all better to be sure and much wiser than me, but still such persons as did not help me, how refreshing was it to fall in with 2 or 3 sensible persons, with whom I could eat my bread and take my walk, and feel myself a free man once more of God's universe. Still, these last were not instructors, and I want instructors. God's greatest gift is a teacher, and when will he send me one full of truth and of boundless benevolence and of heroic sentiments? I can describe the man, I know the idea well, but where is its real blood-warm counterpart? I know whilst I write thus that the creature is never to dawn upon me like a sunburst. I know too well how slowly we edge along sideways to everything good and brilliant in life, and how casually and unobservedly we make all our most valued acquaintances. And yet I saw Ellen at once in all her beauty, and she never disappointed me but in her death. And why may not the Master whom the soul participates so appear? Our stern experience replies with the tongue of all its days. Son of man, it saith, all giving and receiving is reciprocal. You entertain angels unawares, but they cannot impart more or higher things than you are in a state to receive. But every step of your progress affects the intercourse you hold with all others, elevates its tone, deepens its meaning, sanctifies its spirit, and when time and suffering and self-denial shall have transfigured and glorified this spotted self, you shall find your fellows also transformed, and their faces shall shine with the light of wisdom and the beauty of holiness. You who cling with both hands to the literal word and to venerable traditions will, no doubt, find in my complaints a confession and a self-accusation. You will perhaps say I do not receive whom heaven gives, but you must not say any such thing, for I am, you see, speaking truly as to my Maker. Jesus, who has done so much to raise and sweeten human life, and who prized sincerity more than sacrifice, cannot be to me what he was to John. My mother, my brothers, my companions must be much more to me in all respects of friendship than he can be. Quote, how small, of all that human hearts endure, the part that laws or kings can cause or cure, still to ourselves in every place consigned, our own felicity we make or find. In Rome it is not the diameter nor the circumference of the columns, it is not the dimensions or the materials of the temples, which constitute their chief charm. It is the name of Cicero. It is the remembrance of a wise and good man. It is the remembrance of Scipio and Cato and Regulus. The influence of human character, the heroes who struggled, the patriots who fell, the wise men who thought, the men who contend worthily in their lifetime in the same trials which God in this city and this year is placing before each of us. Why are you dazzled with the name of Caesar? A part as important, a soul as great, a name as dear to God as his or any other's is your own. It will take you long to learn another tongue so as to make yourself fully understood by those who speak it, but your actions are easy of translation. They understand what you do. Temperance is good English, and good French, and good Italian. Your courage, your kindness, your honesty are as plain to a Turk as his own alphabet. In Boston, they have an eye for improvement, a thing which does not exist in Asia nor in Africa. And so I left, on the 23rd of April, the city built on 7 hills, the Palatine, the Capitoline, the Coelian, Aventine, Quernal, Viminal, and Esquiline. April 26th. Pesignano. Here sit I this cold eve by the fire in the locanda of this little town on the margin of the lake of Thrasymene, and remember Hannibal and Rome. Pleases me well the clear pleasant air which savours more of New England than of Italy. Today we came from Spoleto to Perugia, on the top of how high a hill with mighty walls and towers far within the gates of the town. Old cathedral, and all around architectural ornaments of the Middle Ages. But were I a proprietor in Perugia, I would sell all and go and live upon the plain. How preposterous, too, it is to live in Trevi, where the streets must make with the horizon an angle of 45 degrees. Yet here in Umbria, every height shows a wide prospect of well-cultivated country. April 27th. Passed a peaceful night close by the dreadful field of Hannibal and Flaminius. This morning we crossed the Sanguinetto and left the pontifical state. We passed by Cortona, the venerable Etruscan town, then by Arezzo, the birthplace of Petrarch, and stopped at night at Louvain. Next morn, April 28th, through the beautiful Val d'Orno, we came to Figline, to Incisa, and in the afternoon to fair Florence. April 29th. And how do you like Florence? Why, well, it is pleasant to see how affectionately all the artists who have resided here a little while speak of getting home to Florence. And I found at once that we live here with much more comfort than in Rome or Naples. Good streets, industrious population, spacious, well-furnished lodgings, elegant and cheap cafes. The cathedral and the campanile, the splendid galleries and no beggars, make this city the favorite of strangers. How like an archangel's tent is this great cathedral of many-colored marble set down in the midst of the city, and by its side its wondrous campanile. I took a hasty glance at the gates of the baptistry, which Angelo said ought to be the gates of paradise, Dine Ciudad el Paradiso, and then at his own David, and hastened to the tribune and to the Pitti Palace. I saw the statue that enchants the world, and truly the Venus deserves to be visited from far. It is not adequately represented by the plaster casts, as the Apollo and the Laocoon are. I must go again and see the statue. Then I went round this cabinet and galleries till I was well nigh dazzled and drunk with beauty. I think no man has an idea of the powers of painting until he has come hither. Why should painters study at Rome? Here. I have been this day to Santa Croce, which is to Florence what Westminster Abbey is to England. I passed with consideration the tomb of Nicholas Machiavelli, but stopped long before that of Galileus Galileo, for I love and honor that man, except in the recantation, with my whole heart. But when I came to Michelangelo Buonarroti, my flesh crept as I read the inscription. I had strange emotions. I suppose because Italy is so full of his fame. I have lately continually heard of his name and works and opinions. I see his face in every shop window, and now I stood over his dust. Then I came to the empty tomb of Dante, who lies buried at Ravenna, then to that of Alfieri. Piazza Santa Maria Novello, number 4599, May 1st. Of my journey from Rome to this city, I cannot give a good account. I came in a vettura with Mrs. Walsh, and Meyer, Mr. O'Flanagan, an Irish priest, and Signor Jacopoli, a Greek returning to New Smyrna after an absence of 10 years for his education in Rome. The journey occupied 5 days and a half. The first night was spent at Civita Castellana. The second day we arrived a little after noon at Terni, and visited the great cascade of Velino. Nature never disappoints us. Her grand and beautiful things always satisfy the eye, and this does. Still, I think the grotto under the cascade at Tivoli better deserves the name of the Hill of Waters. Has more of the terrible in it than anything I saw here. Won't you go to America with me, little fellow? Non, signor. In America all the little boys are taught to read and write. Interni anzi, he replied. Great abundance of the spicy red flowers which they called cappuccini. Terni was the birthplace of Tacitus. The next morning we came to Spoleto, where Hannibal received a repulse after his victory at Thrasymene, and were shown to the Porta de Fuga, named from that event. Here too was a prodigious aqueduct 300 feet high, from Spoleto to Foligno, where we passed the night. All the streets of this town have been shaken by earthquakes. The houses lean and are kept from falling by timbers, which cross the street from house to house. Between Foligno and Venne we saw the temple of small and delicate proportion, dedicated to Clitumnus. Strange dreams at Foligno. Next morn from Foligno to Assisi, through fertile fields and up the mountain to Perugia. Perugia has outgrown its walls, which are far within the town. It commands a wide prospect of cultivated territory. The difference of cultivation is very great between the fat Umbria and the lean Sabina. On we came to the little hamlet of Passignano on the margin of the lake of Trasimene. May 2nd. I revisited the Tribune this morning to see the Venus and the Fornarina and the rest of that attractive company. I reserve my admiration as much as I can. I make a continual effort not to be pleased except by that which ought to please me. And I walked coolly around and round the marble lady, but when I planted myself at the iron gate which leads into the chamber of Dutch paintings, and looked at the statue, I saw and felt that mankind have had good reason for their preference of this excellent work, and I gladly gave one testimony more to the surpassing genius of the artist. Today I had singular pleasure. Mr. Ritchie's kindness procured me the privilege of seeing the apartments occupied by Lord Byron when he was in Florence. They are part of the palace of the Duke of San Clemente, who is Mr. R.'s neighbor. The rooms were very, very richly furnished and hung with tapestry. There were 5 in a range, and the last opening into a large dining hall. Below was a large hall which Byron fitted up as a theater. The palace is in the Via San Sebastiano. How bare and poor are these Florentine churches after the sumptuous temples of Naples and Rome! Ah, ah, for the St. Peter's which I can never more behold. Close by my door is the church of Santa Maria Novella, which Michelangelo called his bride. My eye has not yet learned why. It still looks naked and unfinished to me. The church of St. John's in Malta he might as well have distinguished by such a name. Evening. Beautiful days, beautiful nights. It is today one of the 100 festas of this holiday people. So was yesterday, so is tomorrow. The charming Cascina and the banks of the Arno are thronged, but moonshine or sunshine are indispensable to a festa. As they say in France, quote, there will be no revolution today, for it rains. Florence, Tuesday, May 7th. And here is a short Italian quotation which lacks a translation. May 8th. Today I heard by Charles's letters of the death of Ellen's mother. Fast, fast the bonds dissolve that I was so glad to wear. She has been a most kind and exemplary mother, and how painfully disappointed. Happy now, and oh, what events and thoughts in which I should have deepest sympathy does this thin partition of flesh entirely hide. Does the heart in that world forget the heart that did beat with it in this? Do jealousies, do fears, does the observation of faults intervene? Dearest friends, I would be loved by all of you. Dearest friend, we shall meet again. Florence, May 9th. I rode out this evening with Mr. Miles in the beautiful Cascina. Its walks and groves extend from the Prato gate of the city out for miles along the right bank of the Arno. It is full of sweet-singing birds, the robin and the nightingale, and of quails, partridges, and rabbits kept for game by the Grand Duke. I saw Jerome Bonaparte on horseback. He resembles the pictures of his brother Napoleon, though utterly devoid of his energy of expression. His brother Louis also lives in Florence. The Emperor of Austria is responsible for the good behavior of the family. I went last night to a theatre and heard a whole opera very respectably performed, with all scenic pomp and music and numbers, and paid 1 Paul 10 cents for my seat. A seat in the pit cost 2 crazies. I have visited the palace and gallery of the Principi Corsini, where are Carlo Dolcis and Salvator Rosas in plenty. The original sketch by Michelangelo of his Last Judgment, a fine portrait by Rembrandt of himself, and some other good pictures in many fine rooms. The prince himself is gone to Naples as proxy for the Grand Duke to marry the sister of the king. All night the street echoes with the songs of this musical people. They have fine voices and repeat the airs of the operas. But the boys! May 10th. Visited Professor Amici and saw his optical instruments. He is reputed the maker of the best microscopes in Europe. He has also made a telescope for Herschel in London. He has a microscope whose magnifying power is 6,000 diameters, or 36 million superficies. To instruments of this enormous power he applies the camera lucida, and then draws the outline of the object with pencil. His experiments upon polarized light are beautiful. The price of his best instruments is 800 francs. He has just made one for Dr. Jarvis for $45. Speak out, my boy, speak plain, non capisco, quote, ed io anche non intendo lei, said the beggar. May 11th. Last night I went to the pergola, and to my eyes, unused to theaters, it was a glorious show. The prima donna, Signora del Ser, is a noble Greek beauty, full of dignity and energy of action, and when she sung the despair of Agnes, she was all voice. She had moreover so striking a resemblance to a valued friend in America that I longed to know who and what Signora del Ser was, much more than the issue of the play. But nobody knew. The whole scenery and the dresses of the performers were in admirable taste, everything good but the strutting of the actors. Is it penal for actors to walk? Before the play was done, my eyes were so dazzled with the splendor of light and colors that I was obliged to rest them and look at my shoes for half an hour, that I might keep them for the last act. For my seat in the pit, where the ladies sit also, I paid 3 Pauls 30 cents. I ought not forget the ballet between the acts. Goethe laughs at those who force every work of art into the narrow circle of their own prejudices, and cannot admire a picture as a picture, and a tune as a tune. So I was willing to look at this as a ballet, and to see that it was admirable. But I could not help feeling the while that it were better for mankind if there were no such dancers. I have since learned God's decision on the same, in the fact that all the ballerines are nearly idiotic. May 11th. How little is expressed or can be. In the least action, what an infinity is understood. I heard La Straniera performed last night. Moreover, cannot a lesson of wisdom and glory be got even from the hapless prima donna of an Italian opera? At least one is informed of the extent of female powers, and warned not to be so easily satisfied with the accomplishments of vulgar pretty women. I have heard that the old King George was so impatient of his state that he delighted to dress himself plainly and escape in a morning from Windsor to the market or the lanes, and mix in a crowd. Well, I have seen a man, the lord of quite another sort of principality, forced to pay the same price for all his knowledge, and to unking himself, and take knocks from such Parmacetti gentlemen in order to have a peep at men. May 12th. I dined today with Mr. Askew at his villa, 7 miles out of Florence, and all the road was through a garden. We rode on our return through a shower of flies all the way. I gladly hear much good of the Order of Misericordia. I see these philanthropists now with quite a new feeling when they carry by the dead with their hasty chant. This order is composed of men of all professions and ages and ranks, who for a penance or for love enter into it for a longer or shorter period. They devote themselves to all works of mercy, especially to the care of the sick. They watch and tend them, but never speak, and their faces are never seen, being always covered with a silken hood. They are not known to each other. Cardinals and princes sometimes take the dress of this order for a time. The last Grand Duke was once a member. Miss Anna Bridgen tells me that she saw in Rome a coachman driving a splendid coach with chasseurs attendant who attempted to pass directly through a funeral procession, when one of the misericords ran forward and laid a powerful arm upon the rein of the horse, and lifted his veil to the coachman, who instantly drew up his horses and waited with the utmost respect for the train to pass. They have taken down the old marble bench on which Dante used to sit and look at the beautiful Campanella, and set it into the pavement with the inscription Sasso di Dante. Well, he might sit and admire that charming tower, which is a sort of poem in architecture. One might dream of such a thing, but it seems strange that it should have been executed in lasting stone. Giotto built it, that old Gothic painter. May 15th. Today I dined with Mr. Landor at his villa at San Domenica de Fiesole. He lives in a beautiful spot, in a fine house full of pictures, and with a family most engaging. He has a wife and 4 children. He said good and pleasant things, and preferred Washington to all modern great men. He is very decided in all his opinions, and very much a connoisseur in paintings. He was not very well today, and I go to breakfast with him next Friday. Mr. Hare was present, the author of Guesses at Truth, and Mr. Worsley's. May 16th. This day is the festival of the Ascension, which is a great annual holiday for the Florentines, and pours them all out under the trees and along the lawns of the beautiful Cascina. There they keep a sort of rural Saturnalia. The Grand Duke came up towards evening and took a turn round the square in his coach and bowed gracefully to the bowing multitude. His little children were with him in the coach. In the evening the grounds were light as day, with countless lamps hung in the trees, and in the centre of all an obelisk of flambeaux. Then played the band, and all of the people danced. I believe this rude ball was continued all night. I left them in full activity about 10 o'clock. May 18th. Visited Mr. Landor again yesterday. He lives in the Villa Giardesca. Mr. Landor has a fine cabinet of pictures, and, as Greenall remarked, he, in common with all collectors, imagines that his are the only masterpieces. Ne sutor, etc., and I remembered the story of Voltaire and Congreve. Mr. Hare told me that Mr. Landor has not more than 12 books in his library. I told Landor I thought it an argument of weak understanding in Lord Chesterfield, his slippery morality. It is inexcusable in any man who pretends to greatness to confound moral distinctions. True genius, whatever faults of action it may have, never does. Shakespeare never does, though a loose liver, but such fry as Beaumont and Fletcher and Messenger do continually, and Chesterfield did. Well for him if he had often thought and spoken as when he said, I judge by every man's truth of his degree of understanding. I think it was Socrates that Landor dared to say, so far can a humorsome man indulge a whim. He was a vulgar sophist, and he, Landor, could not forgive vulgarity in anybody. If he saw it in a wise man, he regretted it the more. Noon. I went to the Museum of Natural History, and to the representation in wax of the plague of Florence, and saw how man is made and how he is destroyed. This museum contains an accurate copy in wax from nature of every organ and process in the human frame, and is beautiful and terrible. For in life nature never intends that these things should be uncovered. I have looked into Santa Croce this afternoon, and if I spoke ill of it before, I will unsay it all. It is a grand building, and its windows of stained glass charm me. It is lined and floored with tombs, and there are 2 or 3 richly finished chapels. In one is a fine painting of the Last Supper by Vasari. While we were walking up and down the church, the organ was played, and I have never heard a more pleasing one. I saw the bust of Michelangelo and his 8 wrinkles. When I walk up the piazza of Santa Croce, I feel as if it were not a Florentine, no, nor a European church, but a church built by and for the human race. I feel equally at home within its walls as the Grand Duke so hospitably sounds to me the names of its mighty dead. Buonarroti and Galileo lived for us all, as Don Ferranto says of Aristotle, and then there is something in Italian which is not translated. I met the fair Erminia today. These meetings always cost me a crazy, and it is fit that she should not be slighted in the journal. Erminia is a flower girl who comes to the cafe every morning, and if you will not buy her flowers, she gives them to you, and with such a superb air. She has a fine expression of face, and never lets her customers pass her in the street without a greeting. Every coach, too, in Florence that ventures to stop near the Piazza da Trinità is a tributary of Erminia's. I defy them to escape from her nosegays. She has a rich pearl necklace, worth I know not how much, which she wears on festas. Mr. Wall wishes to paint her portrait, but she says she is not handsome enough. È brutto il mio ritratto. Went again to the opera to see a piece called Ivanhoe. What a miserable abuse to put a woman of dignity and talent into man's clothes to play the part of Wilfrid. The Signora Delzère, who delighted me so much the other night, was strutting about ineffectually with sword and helmet. They had spoiled a fine woman to make a bad knight. I came home disgusted. The Italians use the superlative too much. Mr. Landor calls them the nation of Isimi. A man, to tell me that this was the same thing I had before, said, Il estisissimo cosa. And at the trattoria, when I asked if the cream was good, the waiter answered, Stupendo. They use 3 negatives. It is good Italian to say, Non dit nulla e nessuno. This is the end of Part 2 of Emerson's journal collection number 24, found in Volume 3 of his collected journals. Thank you for listening.